Every man knows the feeling. That burning desire that shows up uninvited and demands satisfaction. The thoughts that won't stop, the urges that override reason and pull you toward behaviors you know weaken you. Lust has controlled men since the beginning of time, and modern society offers no real solution. Just endless ways to feed the beast that only make it hungrier. But there's a method that actually works, proven across thousands of years by monks, warriors, philosophers, and spiritual masters who discovered something the modern world has forgotten. The ancients understood that you don't defeat lust by satisfying it or suppressing it, by transforming the energy itself through a practice so simple and so powerful that it threatens everything built to keep you enslaved. That practice is semen retention, and it's the only method that actually defeats lust. Instead of just temporarily managing it, understanding the enemy. Lust isn't just desire, it's a force that grows stronger every time you feed it, creating a cycle where satisfaction leads to increased craving rather than contentment. The modern approach treats lust as a need that must be satisfied regularly to maintain health and sanity, which is exactly backwards from how the mechanism actually works. Every release trains your brain to expect the dopamine flood, creating stronger neural pathways that make the next urge more intense and harder to resist. You're not satisfying a need, but reinforcing an addiction that keeps you coming back for another hit, then another, in a cycle that never ends and only intensifies. This is why men who release frequently report stronger urges and more frequent thoughts about sex. They're feeding the enemy and wondering why it keeps getting bigger. The battle against lust can't be won by giving it what it wants. Yet that's the only strategy modern thinking offers. Constant indulgence destroys your ability to control sexual desire by rewiring your brain to prioritize immediate gratification over everything else. Each time you act on an urge, you're strengthening the neural pathways that make urges harder to resist in the future. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-control, weakens from lack of use, while the limbic system that drives impulses becomes dominant. Over years of frequent release, you've built a brain that's optimized for giving in to lust rather than controlling it. The urges you experience now are stronger than what you felt years ago, not because your sex drive increased, but because you've trained yourself to be helpless against it. This explains why trying harder with the same approach never works. You're fighting with weakened weapons against an enemy you've been making stronger. The framework itself is broken, which is why you need a completely different approach that reverses the dynamic instead of reinforcing it. The ancient practice, retention, was practiced across completely different civilizations, separated by geography and culture, yet all arrived at the same conclusion. Conservation of sexual energy is the foundation for conquering desire and accessing higher states of being. Buddhist monks took vows of celibacy not as punishment, but as prerequisite for spiritual advancement. Taoist masters cultivated sexual energy through conservation practices they considered essential to longevity and power. Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato advocated sexual restraint as necessary for clear thinking and wisdom. Yogis practicing brahmacharya understood that retained energy rises upward to fuel consciousness, rather than being expelled downward. These weren't random superstitions from primitive cultures, but discoveries made independently across the ancient world by the most disciplined and advanced minds of their time. They found through direct experience that retention transforms lust from master to servant, from uncontrollable force to directed power. The mechanism is straightforward. Lust weakens when you stop feeding it action and strengthens when you indulge it. Each urge you resist makes the next urge slightly easier to handle as your brain learns that giving in isn't an option. Each day of conservation reduces the hormonal fluctuations that trigger compulsive desire. Each week of retention restores dopamine sensitivity, so normal activities become rewarding again, and you stop needing extreme stimulation. The transformation happens gradually through consistent practice. Month 1 feels like constant battle. Month 3 feels manageable. Month 6 feels like freedom. You're not suppressing the desire through willpower, but actually changing the neurological and hormonal conditions that create compulsive lust in the first place. The ancient practitioners understood this even without modern neuroscience, because they felt the transformation happening inside themselves. The method works because it addresses the actual mechanism, rather than just managing symptoms. The victory over lust. Lust begins losing its power around month 3 of retention, as your brain completes its initial rewiring, and your relationship with sexual desire fundamentally changes. The thoughts that used to dominate your mind for hours appear briefly and pass without taking hold. The urges that used to feel unbearable become manageable sensations you can observe without acting on. The compulsive quality disappears, and what remains is pure energy. You can feel moving through your body, but no longer controlling your actions. This shift isn't about developing stronger willpower to resist the same intensity of lust. It's about lust itself becoming weaker as the conditions that created it change through retention. You're not fighting as hard because there's less to fight. The enemy is retreating because you stopped feeding it the actions that gave it strength. The freedom that emerges when you're no longer controlled by sexual impulses is unlike anything modern men experience, because most live their entire lives enslaved without knowing freedom is possible. You wake up and sexual thoughts aren't the first thing in your mind. You can be around attractive people without your brain hijacking your attention towards sexual fantasy. You can feel aroused without it spiraling into compulsive need for release. Your energy and focus stay directed toward your chosen goals, instead of being constantly diverted by sexual distraction. This freedom allows you to build, create. You can achieve at levels impossible when lust is stealing your attention and energy multiple times daily. The ancients pursued this freedom not because they hated sexuality, but because they recognized that being controlled by any desire is slavery, and freedom from that control unlocks capabilities most people never access. The ancient method works where everything else fails because it addresses the root cause, the energy itself, rather than trying to manage symptoms through suppression or controlled indulgence. Suppression doesn't work because you're using willpower to fight biology without changing the underlying drive. Controlled indulgence doesn't work because any feeding of lust makes it stronger, even if you're trying to moderate it. Retention works because it transforms the energy at its source by forcing your entire system to adapt to conservation. Your hormones rebalance. Your brain rewires. Your nervous system learns to handle sexual energy without needing release. After months of this adaptation, you're operating with a completely different relationship to desire than you had before. Not because you're trying harder to control the same lust, but because the lust itself has transformed into energy you actually control. This is what the ancients discovered, and what modern approaches completely miss.